Hey, listen, I want to kind of begin this morning the same way I did last week. Last week was the first Sunday in December. This is the second Sunday in December. So I want to say, Merry Christmas, y'all. Thank you. Absolutely Merry Christmas. We got about 10 days until Christmas Eve, and a lot of excitement going on. It kind of goes with the season, doesn't it? All that stuff. And I mentioned to you last week what a special holiday season this whole Christmas thing is to me, and I know it is to you as well. Most of us here look at that as sort of the apex of all the holiday seasons, running from Thanksgiving all the way through New Year's. And it's really a neat time, a great time to be alive in the United States of America as we celebrate that Christmas season. God has been so good to us. We also talked about last week that not everybody feels exactly that way about the holiday season. Maybe your memories are not as pleasant as mine, and that can be a factor, and I'm sorry about that. And some of us feel that way because of losses that we've had. And the holidays, more than just a time to celebrate, they become a time of remembering. It's just a reminder of what we don't have, right? And that's okay. It can be kind of tough. But as we said last week, really, the very thing that may be a reminder and want you to kind of shy away and even pull away a little bit, that's the very story that you need to embrace. Because that story is a story of hope. It's a story of love. It's a story of joy. And it's a story of peace. That's what the Christmas story is really all about. And those are the things that give meaning. A lot of Christian traditions celebrate what they call Advent. And those are the main subjects of Advent. And those are the key words that you see as prophetically God speaks toward this coming Messiah, or as the Messiah is here. That's the proclamation of the angels, right? Hope, a hope that can sustain, love that gives you empowerment, a kind of joy that's bigger than any suffering or any loss or any grief or any trouble or any struggle that you have. I believe that. Amen to you? And peace. It is the ultimate peace. It is the peace that ends the war that's raging between your heart and your Maker. Nothing in the world like that. And so we embrace that story. As we talked about last week, this story doesn't begin in a stable in Bethlehem 2,000 years ago. That story began way back at the beginning. From the very moment we first, as a humanity, stubbed our toe, there was God extending that message of hope and love and joy and peace. There they were, Adam and Eve, created in the Garden of Eden, should have lived happily ever after, but they didn't because there was trouble in paradise. Let me review just a little bit from last week. Trouble in paradise, and the trouble in paradise was not the serpent, was it? But it was something that was inside the heart of Adam and Eve. In fact, it's inside the heart of every last one of us here this morning. It is that thing that separates us from every other living creature. It's the ability to choose our destiny. Isn't that incredible? The ability to choose. And the problem is that we often make wrong choices. That's at least what I do. That's my story. That's the story of humanity. And right there at the beginning, when that happened, and by the way, God, it's what's incredible to me is God in all of His power makes us to be people to be in partnership with Him. Wow, y'all. He created us to be in this spiritual union, this spiritual connection with Him, right? And so as He does that, in order for that to be true, He had to make us with this ability to choose. You can either choose to reach for the stars, or you can choose to grovel in the mud from which we have been made. We have the ability to choose good or bad, or righteousness or unrighteousness, or light or dark. We can choose to reject that love that He has provided for us, to reject the hope and to reject the joy and reject the peace. It's our choice. It's our choice. I don't know about all of your choices, but as we said last week, right now as you sit there, you represent a summation of every choice you've ever made. The direction of your life right now is a result of those choices. Right? It's a result of them. The bent and the direction, the trajectory of our lives has been shaped by that. And here's the thing about it, no matter what it is, it can be changed by that story, by that. The baby came. The Lord came. So you see, right from the beginning, bad choices. God is pronouncing judgment because of those choices. And the first one He turns to is the serpent himself. And he says to that serpent, you are going to crawl on your belly the rest of your time of your existence. You're going to be lower than low. And let me tell you this, somebody's coming. That's the message. The hope is right there. The love is right there. The joy is right there. The potential for peace is right there from the very first. Isn't that so like God? I don't care what we do to mess up. There's God to salvage this thing. You know, listen, y'all, this is something great that we're a part of here. Don't let it get by you. And so he says right there, somebody's coming, and speaking to the serpent, he says, you're going to be trouble for him. You're going to nip him on the heel, but he's going to stomp your brains out. That's going to be the end story. And so last week we kind of looked at how that story developed. We all looked on through Genesis. We went into 2 Samuel chapter 7, 2 Samuel chapter 7, the Nathan Chronicles. Nathan was one of the prophets that spoke to David. And there we find, starting in verse 10, this apex moment, this sort of this crowning summation of all of the Old Testament history, kind of early on in that Old Testament history, but there it is. Nathan's saying to him, to David, I'm going to establish your kingdom forever. A descendant of yours is going to sit on the throne forever. And you know what? An actual, literal descendant of David sat on that throne, the throne of Judah, for almost 400 years. Trouble was coming, though. Once again, that kingdom fell to the Babylonians, and the prophets began to realize, even before the end came, that this must be speaking about another kingdom. Still an actual literal descendant of David, but this descendant is not going to establish some kind of earthly kingdom. It is a spiritual kingdom where the lion lies down with the lamb, where the leopard sleeps with the goat. Who ever heard of such a thing? Who ever heard of such a thing? Nowhere except in the kingdom of God, talking about the peace and the hope and the love and the joy. How can such a thing happen? Only by the zeal of God, Isaiah prophesied. We looked at that last week. Only by the zeal of God can anything like that actually happen. Can it actually take place? Because unto us a child has been born. A child that is called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. And the end of his governance, there is no end. To the end of his peace, there is no end. It is endless. We're a part of something great here, y'all. You thought you just come to church this morning, didn't you? This is something fantastic and fabulous, and there it is. It didn't just begin 2,000 years ago, all the way through. And we see a crowning moment there 2,000 years ago in that stable in Bethlehem. The sheep are there and some goats are there, maybe cattle. I don't know who all is there, but there's that little virgin mother, 16 years old maybe. Her husband has a lot of faith in that wife, almost as much as he has in the father that he trusts. And there's that little baby wrapped in swaddling clothes, has little kicking feet and hands. And who is that? God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace, Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God is He. That's who's there. And we killed him. We put him to death because, here's the thing, we've got this thing to choose inside of us, and sin has messed it up, right? Our choices have messed it up. So we killed him as a result of all of that. But 3 days later, he rises from the grave. How does that happen? Only by the power of God. The zeal of God Almighty. Isaiah prophesied it. The zeal of God Almighty raised him from that grave. The door marked no exit. We've talked about that before. He walks straight through it. And in John, what's the first thing he says to those disciples? Man, I love this. What's the first thing he said to them? Peace be to you. Peace. And they were all excited. They couldn't get over the fact, we thought you were dead. Well, I was. But by the power of God, I've been raised. So first thing he says to them is, peace be with you. They're all excited. The next thing that he says, here's the second thing that he says to them. Peace be with you again, he said. And then he said, as the Father has sent me, so I'm sending you. You know what that means? The story ain't over. Sometimes ain't is exactly the word you want to use. Story ain't over yet. It began in Genesis, and it is still going on as we carry that story, that good news, to everybody around us, just as our vision has said. All right? Now, this morning, a little bit longer review, so let's kind of cut to the chase. Page 2. As Paul Harvey used to say. How many of you remember Paul Harvey? Oh, okay. The rest of the story. We're going to look at something in Matthew that is not found in any other gospel. In any other gospel account, what he talks about is not there. In fact, it's not found written anywhere else in history. There's a little guy named Mardonidas who way back a long time ago made reference to some of these events, but it's almost for certain that he got it from Matthew himself. Matthew is the guy. It's part of the nativity narrative. That's what scholars call that. They got to have big terms to feel important, I guess. So part of Matthew's nativity narrative are some things that you don't see in Mark or in Luke or in John or anywhere else. And it's not something you're going to see acted out in any of the children's plays when the little kids dress up in their shepherd suits and all of those things that go on, or in some cases, big people dress up in their shepherd suits, as you saw last Sunday night, which, by the way, that entire play, Emmanuel hung on the shepherds, I felt like. Did y'all think that? Seemed that way to me. You're not going to hear this part of the story, because this is sort of an ugly, nasty sort of thing. And tell you honestly, in the United States of America, we love happy endings, don't we? You know, when some of these movie companies, they will put out their movies in limited showing with different endings so people can kind of vote, which ending do you like the best, before they distribute it for everybody. Did you know they always invariably vote for the happy ending? I mean, that's just kind of the way, that's our mentality right now. Well, let me tell you, Matthew missed the vote, and we got a pretty unhappy ending going on here, and there's a reason for it. I think Matthew's saying some things to us that helps ground this story in real life. It grounds the story into a way, and it kind of seats it into an environment that I understand, because my heart longs for more. My heart longs for that perfect peace and that perfect beauty, that perfect love, that perfect hope, and all of that. But I'm living in a world so messed up, and it's just messed up, y'all. It's just messed up. My life is messed up. Every time I turn around, my bad choices are messing with my family. It's messing with my good intentions. It's just so there it is. All right. So let's let Matthew speak to us here just a little bit, starting in Matthew chapter 2, verse 12. When they had gone, okay, now by the way, the they here, if you read up earlier in Matthew chapter 2, those are the wise men from the ancient Far East. They brought gifts of what? Gold? And you've read the story, right? And that's the part that gets acted out in all of the plays, right? The wise men come and they bring those gifts, and that's sort of the tail end of what we normally hear and what we normally see, right? When they had gone, everything's kind of get back to normal. The skies had opened up with this whole angelic chorus serenading shepherds who are out there taking care of their sheep at night. It has such a romantic feel to it, doesn't it? And they rush in to see the little baby there crying in a manger, lying in a manger, his parents there, and the wise men come. That's the stuff that's like almost like fairy tale, right? And so here's page 2. When they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. Get up. Take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Now, if I'm dreaming, and here's what I hear from God, that word escape is going to get my attention. How about you? Right? Don't leave. Don't travel. Don't take a vacation too. You better escape. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him. I wonder if Mary and Joseph thought, my gosh, you bring about a virgin birth? This is everlasting Father, mighty God, Prince of Peace. Couldn't you take care of Herod? We got to run? Does that question pop into your mind? Have y'all read page 2 before? Probably. So he got up, took the child and his mother during the night, and left for Egypt. You know, it looks like that same night, under cover of night, where he stayed until the death of Herod. And so was fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet, out of Egypt I called my son. By the way, just as a sidebar, this page 2 is broken down into 3 parts. We're not going to talk about all this. I'm just going to mention it to you. Each part ends with an Old Testament prophecy, and it is a story that's a whole lot like Moses. In fact, some of the things that you read in the story of Moses back in the book of Exodus, you see reproduced almost word for word here in this chronology of events that occurs. All right? So he runs from Herod. This is Herod the Great. This is a guy who was a master politician. He understood Roman politics. He understood Jewish politics. He was a conniver, and he was a megalomaniac. Paranoid. This was a guy killed his wife because he felt like she threatened his throne, his power somehow. Yeah. Not only that, killed her grandfather, killed her brother. He killed his own children. In fact, the saying back in the day was, better to be an enemy of Herod than a member of his family. He killed his own kids because he felt threatened. In fact, you know what else he did? At one point, he murdered the entire Jewish Sanhedrin court. Somewhere around 70 guys because he felt threatened. He didn't like them. And not only that, he reached out in the Jerusalem community, and prominent men at different times during his reign, he just executed them, did away with them. So when it says Herod is out to get the child, you better listen, right? You better listen. Once again, couldn't God have dealt with that in some... yeah, but there's some other stuff happening here. You know what God is doing? Let me just cut to the chase here because I can't stand it. God's shaping the baby. And he's shaping the environment that you and I live in as followers of the baby. God didn't take everything away. Would you agree with that? He didn't just take everything away. All right. So do it. He goes to Egypt. By the way, just as a sidebar, Egypt was a place where had a lot of Jewish refugees in it. In fact, do you know the very first Jewish refugees that ever went to Egypt? Do y'all know who they were? Anybody know? Jacob. Jacob and his family, his son Joseph, had become number 2 guy in Egypt, and there was famine in the land, and they all went to Egypt to live, and it had been going on ever since. In fact, at the time of Jesus, the big major cities in Egypt, they all had Jewish refugees in them. Alexandria was the biggest one. That was a huge educational mecca, a mecca for artists and all that sort of thing. Scholars say there were as many as 1 million Jewish refugees there. And so he gets up and leaves in the middle of the night, heads off as a refugee. No job, no belongings. How do you provide? You just had a baby. How in the world do you provide? How do you take, can you get into that? So off he goes. Part 2, verse 16. When Herod realized he'd been outwitted by the Magi, and by the way, you remember that's earlier in Matthew chapter 2, the Magi had come to Jerusalem saying, where is he who was born king of the Jews? Herod got wind of it and said, whoop, king of the Jews, I've killed almost all my family. I'm not going to let this stand. And so he got with the Magi and said, you tell me when you find him, you tell me where he is so I can worship him also. They said, okay, these are guys of good faith. But God warned them in a dream as well. Don't you go back because this is bad news. So he didn't. So when Herod realizes that he'd been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious and he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem. I'm having some voice problems. Anybody else in here having those kinds of things going on right now? Give me a big hug. I got a Christmas present for you. When you guys coming? Actually, mine's just allergies. I'm sorry about that. But we'll get through this morning, all right? This is an exciting story. Gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under. He didn't want to take any chances. 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time that he had learned from the Magi, then what was said through the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled. A voice is heard in Ramah, weeping in great mourning. Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted because they are no more. Last week we talked a little bit about the nature of Old Testament prophecy, how there's a right then and then there's a later fulfillment and so on and so forth. This kind of gets into that. We're not here to talk about all of that today. You know who Rachel is? Right, she was married to Jacob, right? Jacob is the one, the father of the Israelite nation. He's the one that daddied all those kids. Rachel was one of the women that through which he had these children. And she dies in 1 Samuel chapter 10. Guess where she was buried? Bethlehem. Bethlehem. At the time that all this occurs, and when Jeremiah writes, there was a little area of Bethlehem, just on the outskirts of Bethlehem, about 6 miles from Jerusalem, where she was buried. And Jeremiah is talking about the Babylonian captivity. I think some people think Assyrian, but that doesn't matter. Babylonian captivity. And as they're carrying the captives off, they'd have gone right through that neck of the woods. And so he personifies a dead Rachel by weeping. My kids are gone. And Matthew is saying, no, it's even bigger than that. This is a prophecy about the murder of the innocents. Some people have said this could not have actually happened, Herod killing these people, because it's not recorded anywhere else in history. Did y'all know that? It's not recorded anywhere else in history. What's up with that? But you think about it just for a second. A guy that kills his wife and his grandfather and her brother and his own kids and the entire Sanhedrin and other prominent people. the execution of 20 babies on a little old outskirts of Jerusalem. There's a place called Bethlehem would hardly cause a blip on the screen, right? Hardly cause a blip on the screen. And that's what they think. There may have been 20 because of infancy. What am I trying to say? What is it? Thank you, mortality rate. I knew I was somewhere in the neighborhood. Maybe 20, they think. So he kills them. He kills them. Part 3. After Herod died, an angel of the Lord appeared. And some people say that may have lasted about 7 years, that Jesus was a refugee king, being shaped by all of this. An angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother and go to the land of Israel, for those who are trying to take the child's life are dead." So he got up, took the child and his mother, and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning in Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. Archelaus killed around 300 prominent men in Jerusalem. He learned well from his daddy. So he was afraid to go there. Having been warned in a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee. And he went and lived in a town called Nazareth. So was fulfilled what was said through the prophets: he will be called a Nazarene. What do you do with all of this? Well, there's several things that those accounts do for me. One of them is that life's tough. It's difficult. And there's a sense in which I look at all of that story, and I hope that we all feel stirred to some degree or another to all the folks around us that are displaced, all the folks around us that are refugees in one form or another, especially this time of year. I wonder if Jesus had that in mind when he said those words, "As often as you do that to the least of these, you do it also to me." We're mindful of all of that. So that's part of it. But here's the thing that really sticks out to me about that. God was on point. God had a vision. God was on mission. And he stuck with it no matter what. There are the Herods that are in that. There's the Archelauses that are in that. There's all of this that's going on. But he stayed with it. He stayed with it. He stayed with it. He stayed with it to bring about the little baby. Remember what Isaiah had said. It's only by the zeal of God that this can be accomplished. Well, there's a modus operandi in all of that for me, and I hope it is for you as well. We're on mission. We got a vision. We got to see it through. Whatever the Herods are, whatever the Archelauses are, we're going to see it through. Richard brought up some things earlier about kind of what's happening budget-wise. Now, let me just say something right here. I said to you about 2 years ago, I was never going to talk about budget again. Y'all remember me saying that? Anybody here remember? We're going to talk about, we've talked about the generosity, the joy of generosity. It's great. Generosity is the greatest example that your heart has been touched by grace of anything that there is. And the joy that comes through that kind of generosity, whether it's money or time or whatever it might be, that's a testimony in and of itself. I'm not talking about budget here. I'm not ever doing that again. But I am talking about us staying on course. I am talking about us keeping those commitments that we've said that we would do. And I am talking about rising up and meeting a need. Maybe we've maintained our commitments, but there's still a need that's there because lots of things have happened during the years. Richard made mention of folks that we've helped and will continue to help as we do our bridge building kind of thing. There's a deal there that we want to hang on to. Richard said something else a moment ago. I want to kind of go back and bang on that just a little bit. He talked about how generous this congregation was. Listen, y'all, I know lots of congregations. They're generous people here. Generous people. Just think about last week. If you were here last week, we made mention of the fact, I think that was the second time maybe that we had done that we were doing a foreign missionary Christmas collection. We just kind of mentioned it a time or two. Did you realize that you guys gave a $25 shy of $11,000 to give to our missionaries? Isn't that something? And that's marvelous. We got missionaries in South America, missionaries in Central America, we got missionaries in the Philippines, and they're going to get a huge Christmas bonus that they can, every last one, because of the generosity of this bunch. And you, you did it smiling. And you remember at the end last week, the end of our services, Heidi McGrainer gets up here and she speaks to everybody about the clothing blanket drive that we had for Fifth Street. Do you remember what she said? She showed us pictures of it. There was so many blankets. I remember I was sitting right here, so I kind of see this screen right here. So many blankets and so many jackets. It filled the entire Kids Grove stage area. Have you been back there? That stage is like, what is that? How big is that stage? Well, it is big. Is it about half this? Yeah, there's something about like this. Stacked clear up. It looked like it was stacked at least head high. And it was, all of that was given not only once, but twice. It was so much I had to take it over there, and you guys continued to give. And so there it was. And you look at the whole year, you think about the tsunami in the Philippines and all the things that were going on, all of those things that we've so willingly given to. In fact, did you realize that over this last year, our designated giving that way has shot up? Man, it's just gone up. It's higher than it's ever been before. What we're talking about is this stuff that maintains facility, maintains ministry that we do here. This is the kind of thing, that week-to-week giving that helps leave behind a legacy. A legacy. Now, I want you to do this. I want you to think about this. And I want you to pray about it. Not because it's a budget. I said a moment ago, I don't raise money for budgets ever again. God's going to give us what God's going to give us. And God's going to give us what we're going to use to His glory. Amen? Okay? So I'm not talking about that. But I am talking about hearts of generosity that see Jesus in every opportunity. I don't know if you probably don't know Tom Long. I'm going to tell you this little story and I'm done here. But Tom Long, and I don't know the guy that did this because it's a friend of Tom's, but he's talking about a friend of his that led a youth group to Jamaica. They go to Jamaica and they're taking a look at all the stuff that's there. They're working there and doing all kinds of things. Great work, great opportunities. And they go to this elementary school to witness, to kind of watch what's happening in the educational environment. And the classroom is it's just overpacked. There's no way anybody you can't stir them with a stick in there. Most of them poverty-stricken children. It's loud, it's noisy, it is a chaotic learning environment. Maybe they're kind of showing out a little bit because of all the guests that are there. I don't know. But they said the teacher, and there was this little young lady, so calm, so patient with everybody in the classroom, she never lost her patience. She treated each child with respect. And the youth group kids got to talking about this later on. What a love for teaching this young woman had to be so committed to that, so dedicated to that. So they had some opportunity to be with her and to meet with her. And they said, you must really love teaching to be able to do what you do. She stopped them. A true story here. She stopped them and she says, that's not because I love teaching. She says, because I love Jesus. And I look into the face of each one of those children and I see Jesus. You look into the face of every ministry, you look into the face of every ministry effort, you look into the face of everything that we do here. We're not talking budget here. We're talking the baby that came. Can we serve you guys in any way this morning? Whatever needs you might have, let us know about it. I'm going to ask our elders if they would and their wives to go to the back. And some prayer requests that you want to share, you go with those guys as we stand and sing together.
God is with us now. His love rains down. His love reigns now. And we are saved by grace and power. His love rains down. His love reigns now. God is with us now. His love rains down. His love reigns now. And we are saved by grace and power. His love rains down. His love reigns now. God is with us now. God is with us now. His love reigns down. His love reigns now. And we are saved by His love rains down. His love rains down. God is with us now.